I'm live streaming on YouTube today. If you aren't watching, you just suck, because this live stream's such good luck. All the best and smartest people in the world are watching this. Which means currently there are 0 important people in the world, except for me. I'm watching this. You might say, well, why am I watching this? After all, I'm the one who's generating the content. Do I really need to concurrently watch it while I create it? Is that even possible? Is that some kind of dream world multitasking? Well, maybe. And then again, maybe not. You see, I may be watching the stream in the sense that I have a tab open, but I'm not really paying attention to the pictures of me. So I shouldn't even count as a viewer. True viewers gaze lovingly upon my visage the entire time I'm streaming. I've got a certain glowing magnetic charisma that really lightens up a room. To say I'm even more charismatic than evangelical preacher Benny Hinn. I have a question. Does anybody ever actually believe those things where they go like the guy did today? He comes in, he does some measurements, takes some pictures, shows me some problems with my gutters, and then he writes me an estimate for $9,600 or something. And then he tells me, but look, if I can get this done today, only under those circumstances, I can drop the price by $3,000. And I'm like, okay, well, today's not over yet, so maybe I'll call you later. Of course I didn't, because it's still too expensive. And he called later and he's like, okay, well, if you do it today, it's $5,000. I said to him, look, the one thing I know for sure is that I don't want to make a decision today. I understand that I may be putting at risk this great deal, but I'm not in any hurry to make a decision on this. And the reason I signed up to have you guys come give me an estimate was because they said the estimate's good for a year. Well, I'm sure that the top price estimate that I was quoted initially is probably good for infinity if you're willing to pay that. But it's also the case that if I were to call him a few weeks from now and say, you know what, I decided I do want to get this done for $5,000. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm going to go for a cheaper, more half-assed solution. But let's say I were to do that. Of course I'll get it for $5,000. He wasn't too high pressure. He was just trying to get the deal done, you know? I don't blame him. But it's like, who believes that shit? Does anybody believe, like, oh my God, we have to act today or we're going to lose this good price? I don't think so. Wow, there must be something really important today. If it's such a terrible day to get gutter work done that if I buy it today, I get it for basically half price. Wow. Today must have been a terrible day at the gutter fixing place. I've never had somebody say that to me, but if they did, I would say, okay, that sounds good. I get that he's robbing his company or whatever, but, you know, uh, that's not my problem. That's his and the company's problem, not my problem. I have no reason to afford the company that I call out um, like basically anti-headhunter benefits. It's the company's job to make sure their employees aren't like that. If they send me an employee of theirs that's like that, I have no obligation to respect their arrangement. It's not my arrangement. I generally like to hire random guys rather than big companies. Uh, but I'm discovering that most of the stuff that I might hire somebody to do, I could probably do it myself. Like fixing in front of the mailbox. Turned out it wasn't that big of a deal. All I required was a little bit of Adderall and the impetus to start. I won't do nitrous again either because of the damage it did physically, causing neuropathy. But I wouldn't do them all again. There are some drugs that I've taken that I don't like. I wouldn't do those ones again. I've smoked black tar heroin before. I wouldn't smoke black tar heroin again. It just makes me puke and feel terrible. What makes alcohol uniquely destructive for me? Well, the answer to that is it's a drug that correlates strongly to me making bad decisions about consuming that drug. Once you get a few drinks in you, it's like, am I drunk or just kind of tipsy? Probably I'm just tipsy. I'll have another one. I mean, the thing is, it's not the case that an alcoholic is literally powerless over alcohol. It, it doesn't play out like that because human beings don't make a succession of discrete decisions about something like that, where there were always instances where I could and did control my drinking. Usually, it had to do with being at work or something, you know. There were instances where I drank a moderate amount because it was a work function where there was drinking being done, but I couldn't really cut loose, you know. Then there were occasions when just the cycle of energies and such made it that instead of getting drunk on a given night, I just have 2 glasses of wine and go to bed, you know. So it was a lot of different things. But most importantly, what it was the reality that I guess maybe the instant reward of relaxation, you know, combined with the physically gratifying, like, belly warmth of alcohol. Well, I guess ultimately it was just a drug that made me genuinely relax and feel good. And so, obviously, that was something that I guess I needed badly or wanted badly. And then, you know, the thing is, it got worse over the years, more or less. It was a little stock markety, but gradually down. Such that it was like I got to the point where I was always either drunk or hungover. I'm just talking about my experience. For people who have a good relationship with alcohol, kudos to them. Unfortunately, I think the people who need alcohol the most are the least likely to have a good relationship with it. Like, I really needed alcohol. It was exactly what you wanted when you wanted something. When you needed some head change that was gonna take the edge off or whatever. It was always the right choice for most of what you want drugs to do. But the problem is, I've never encountered another drug that negatively impacted my judgment, even a fraction as much as alcohol does, you know. I seem to have a pretty sophisticated relationship with most of the drugs I do, if not all of them. Like mushrooms, it used to be that I was too fiendy with them, and I'd do them too often, and then they wouldn't really work very well. I'd usually be disappointed that I did them, or I'd have, you know, mushroom tantrums, or I'd have to eat a whole fucking ounce because I couldn't wait any days. That's changed. I like to wait about a week in between mushroom trips. Um, and I'm not fiending about them at all. Mushrooms are the only other drug that I can think of that directly makes me feel good, like alcohol did. But it's not nearly as subject to abuse. I mean, alcohol was my first and most effective ADHD medication. Alcohol made it comfortable and pleasant to just sit there and watch TV and just feel like, that warm buzz in your head, you know. It's so gratifyingly complete. But as a consequence, because it's so gratifyingly complete, it you have to, for me, I have to sacrifice judgment for that completeness. Because part of the completeness is being liberated from more careful, deliberative engagement with the world. Being even more at the mercy of my FI than I am without alcohol. And I'm supremely at the mercy of my FI without alcohol. Such that if somebody makes me mad, all of a sudden I'm yelling at them before there's no decision made there. It's like all of a sudden I'm mad and I'm yelling at them, you know? Well, that phenomenon, at least when I'm not drinking, I'm not super far removed from noticing myself, what I'm doing, and questioning the wisdom of it. When I'm drunk, forget about it. I'm not going to be doing that kind of objective self-criticism that is the earmark of my day-to-day normal Eric. It's like the objective self-criticism goes right out the window, which causes you to make mistakes, me to make mistakes. I'm interested in having fun, and of course this is fun and cool. This is crazy. This is great, yeah. Or, of course I'm right. Fuck that person. Whoa, 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 whoa. When really next day you realize, oh, God, I wasn't right. I mean, that's one of the problems with being drunk, too, is the impeccably clean sheet that I maintain of correctness. That was not a feature of drunk Eric. Well, I mean, my contention is, Boba Fett, that FI Polar is FI Polar is an example of a type that is driven by their FI and is not aware of it because they don't get the difference between frame level FI and operational level FI. So, like frame level FI is about why you're saying what you're saying and not something else. Operational level FI is like being bad at TI. The thing is, what happens is this. I have frame level FI driving the boat. So somebody says meow, pisses me off, and then I've got operational level rationality. So I just convey meow, 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 about all these reasons why they're wrong, all the good arguments, etc. So I think to myself, the unreflective within the frame of cognitive functions, Eric thinks to himself. So in other words, if I didn't have cognitive functions, I'd think, obviously I am rational. I'm making all these rational arguments. Because FI polar doesn't even notice or think about, but why am I so mad about it? Or, but why am I responding to this rather than this, or this? It doesn't consider those things. It's like, I think my madness is irrelevant because all I'm doing is providing correct, clean, objective argumentation in defense of my advocacy. And the fact that it's my advocacy because I feel passionate about it for some reason or another doesn't seem relevant to me. But ultimately, people who are deft with their FI understand, I would presume, why they direct their energies, be they rational or irrational, there rather than here, you know? For me, life just happens to me. People say things say things say people. Before you know it, it's all a big confusing mess. Yeah. Jonathan Haidt. Will you get your mucus dripping wrongness away from my taco salad, please? I can imagine me having a Mexican lunch with Jonathan Haidt. And he's so dim that he's got in his hand something. He says, would you like one of these chips with salsa on it? And he doesn't even notice that's not a chip with salsa he's offering me. It's a mucus dipped wrongness cube. I'm like, no, I don't want to eat that. Yeah, well, I'm trying to work it out. In other words, I'm doing a good job of working it out. You, if you were able to accurately assess your own efforts, would say you're doing a good job of confusing people with reification, fallacy, and metaphor. I hope I meet that guy someday. I'm going to walk up to him and say, metaphorical slap, sir, right in the face. I'll be like, what? I get it. I think Jonathan Haidt would touch my potato. He seems like that kind of guy. He'd be like, oh, nice skin on your potato, and he'd just kind of rub it with his dirty fingers. Be like, that's crazy how groups create rituals of potato touching, huh? And I'd say, no, Jonathan Haidt, that's just you being an inconsiderate, potato molesting freak. Groups didn't create that. That's all you, buddy. Don't try to ditch your responsibility for it by attributing ownership of its creation to a group now. Boom. drop all of the mics right on top of his breakfast sandwich. I'm a sassy, saucy Sasquatch full of sassafras. It's a saffron-colored spice. I must say, it is so nice to have a properly robust torching lighter to pull bong rips with. Since both my torches are broken. Well, let's pronounce it differently then, Bob. Let's pronounce it Haidita. 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 Jonathan Haidita, your ideas are as dumb as your last name. So anyway, Rachel and I finished today, not that long ago, the first season. I believe there is a second season, but don't quote me on it. The first season of Queen's Gambit. And oh my gosh, was that delightful. What a wonderful show. I really liked it. I'm not sure I liked her, like, stopping doing drugs before she beat the Russian guy. Spoiler alert, too late. That seemed a little... bleh. I mean, yeah, she had to clean up her act a little bit, but this whole, like, and now I'm sober, and I'm a strong woman. I gotta make that sorry, I got a chance. I don't like it. I mean, the reality is, what she should have been taking all along, instead of tranquilizers, was amphetamines. That would have made a lot more sense. Why would you be inspired to see genius chess moves or whatever on tranquilizers? That doesn't even make any sense. That's just going to make her tranquil, not better at chess. Amphetamines, on the other hand, well, those are quite likely to make her better at chess. Help her pay closer attention, stay strongly motivated throughout the long and mentally exhausting processes of a chess tournament, which I gotta say, I don't believe that show represented the actual mechanics of a chess tournament accurately. I believe most people in a chess tournament play more than one game with their opponent, at least in the finals. So they'll play like best of 7 or something like that. But I could be wrong about that. I know that sometimes happens. I don't know which is the norm. The way they had it positioned in the TV show was that it's straight up one and done seeded tournament. I don't think they do chess tournaments like that, but I could be wrong. Have you seen the show Queen's Gambit, Winston's Mom? That girl in that show, that character is written as like a textbook INTJ. Depends on the tournament. Okay. Well, then I guess it's not it wasn't necessarily unrealistic. I tell you what was unrealistic. A girl winning a chess championship. Girls should play chess. Girls should play the RuPaul's Drag Race. The funny thing is, the reason I haven't checked it out until now is because it came out, that show, after that douchey dude was named Queen's Gambit around here. So Queen's Gambit on YouTube got that name before that show came out. It was his name before it was that show's name. So props to him for, it not being the other way around. But because I don't like that guy so much, when the show came out, I was just like, ew. Just because the name had been poisoned to me. Well, I'm glad I finally got over my ew, because I watched the whole season in like 2 days, and it was really good. It is old news. I am not an early adopter of the show, but that's part of the reason why I mentioned having finished that. Figured probably a lot of people have seen it. If you've seen Queen's Gambit and give it an A or an A plus, raise your hand. Then type into the chat either the words, I am raising my hand, or a hand emoji. Because I won't be able to see you actually raising your hand. Because I'm looking through you. Where did you go? I thought I could see you, but I can't see if you're raising your hand. You don't look different, but I never had a baseline of what you looked like in the first place. I'm looking through you. Do you have your hand up? Like, I started, before Queen's Gambit, another show on Netflix called Sweet Tooth. And I put in a couple episodes of that, and it's pretty good. It is pretty good. And then I started Queen's Gambit, and I was like, okay, this is good though. And so I backburnered that other show and then watched all of Queen's Gambit. It's really smart because I love the way that they red herring you. They red herring you constantly, but you can't accuse them of red herrings because they don't explicitly like red herring things. They just take advantage of the way certain archetypes have conventionally played out in media in recent years. So it's like right off the bat, when she goes to this orphanage, there's sort of vague, suggestive moods of, oh no, the male orderlies are gonna molest her or something. Or, oh my God, this is gonna be one of those horrible, abusive orphanages. Because right out the gate, the orphanage has a protocol where they give tranquilizers to all of the children to keep their moods stable. And so the audience jumps to the conclusion this is an abusive orphanage, and it turns out to be not at all abusive. It's not exactly loving or anything. It's old school, but it's straight up. When like when she first goes down to the basement where the janitor is, you go, uh-oh, what's gonna happen to her? And she goes into the basement with the janitor. Well, it turns out he's playing chess and wants her to go away, and she bugs him, and finally he goes, okay, fine, we'll play a game of chess. And she learned how to play chess from him. So it keeps, like, it fooled me time and time and time again. It's a great show for intuitives who are intuiting likely outcomes, like, and it'll double trick you. So when she goes to Russia, she's the CIA agent says to her, like, hey, keep an eye out for a sign from Barkov, the Russian grand champion. The implication, they don't express the words directly, but the implication is this guy's CIA. It never said directly who he is, but when she asks him, what part of the State Department are you from? He just looks at her and doesn't answer the question. And then you can infer from that he's probably CIA, right? So then but at this point in the show, I've learned, hey, I'm not going to bite on this one. And then when they get her off the airport, and you can see how much she's like appreciating how much the Soviets valued chess. And I'm like, aha, it's not Barkov who's going to defect, it's her. No, they just fooled me again. So I was really impressed with the show's ability to fool me every time, anticipate that I will have learned how they're fooling me, and adjust, and then adjust in anticipation of that to continue to fool me. It was really impressive. So, quite brilliantly written show, I think it's fair to say. And that red-haired girl does an excellent job of playing an INTJ. If you told me, like, here's some clips of an actress trying to play an INTJ, I'd be like, she's killing it. But it's just one of those circumstances where probably the writer of the film doesn't know anything about typology. Probably the actress doesn't know she's acting like an INTJ, but she just intuits what that character would act like, and because the character is an INTJ, she nails it as an actress without knowing anything about typology. Therein lies intuition. Intuition is the link between efficacy and universality. Without intuition, efficacy is barbaric and brutish. You want to substantiate that claim, Eric? No, I'm being poetic. Okay, just let it fly. But you get so mad when other people get poetic, but I'm doing it better than them. It's fine. Plus, by hanging a lantern on it like this, I'm meta up and out of any trap I might have set for myself accidentally there. You know, with every critique, you set yourself up to be hammered with the same critique. So you gotta be very attentive to your behavior. These are the ways of the world. If you're like most people, everything's always hypothetical, but argued in advance because sometimes those arguments come up. With practice, INTJs become skilled at nodding and making responsive noises at appropriate times while internally wondering whether dolphins have language or thinking about Star Wars breaks the laws of physics. Well, that's why it breaks the laws of physics. Well, I mean, science fiction would too. No, I think, Mr. Bobby, you have to call Star Wars science fiction. Here's the dividing line between fantasy and science fiction. Spaceships and ray guns. If you've got spaceships and ray guns, no matter how much there are additional fantasy elements, it is definitely science fiction. Sure, they've got science fiction versions of swords with their lightsabers, but they are, in fact, science fiction versions of it. Sure, you've got magic with the Force, but after all, it's in a galaxy far, far away, and it happened a long, long time ago. And the people in that galaxy, obviously, they had mastered the Force. Some of them, a few of them. I guess it was. The thing to critique about Star Wars is they make the aristocrats actually better than other people, right? They have special powers, the aristocrats. I think that should always be critiqued because, after all, we should never forget fancy people or people in fancy positions are just regular scrubs like you and me. It's like, that's part of the problem with conspiracy theories and stuff about presidents and shadow governments and all that stuff, is that it starts out the gate by affording superpowers to people who are just regular schmucks like you and me. You know? Just because they're in a position where they're highly visible and or... What's that noise? Oh, it's this cat fountain. Oh, we got a new cat fountain today. Yeah, my Jane Strauss thing. Keeping Jane in the loop. So that was a good idea. This one says, freshman prep, San Marino High School. Jane Strauss, and there she is, sitting at her desk with a potted plant beside her. Looking like I remember when I was a kid. As an ISFJ dead mother, She deserves a place in the kitchen. She spent a lot of time in the kitchen. She loved to cook. She'd sort of tunelessly hum and chat to herself and putter around the kitchen, making things and saying things like, "Oh, this feels so good to get these vegetables from the garden all incorporated into this." Yeah, I was like, shit like that. She wouldn't have used the word incorporated, probably, even though she was an English teacher. But well, go ahead, Mr. Man. If you want to go out, go out. And if you want to stay in, stay in. 'Cause there's a lot of kitty men, and trouble is one. It's a Cat Stevens song, I believe. I think it's Cat Stevens. Except the actual lyrics are, if you want to be high, be high. And if you want to be low, be low. 'Cause there's a million ways to go. You know that there are. And then what I always want to do when I get to the end of that part of that song is I want it, and now I can't even remember how the actual chorus goes. I always segue into this. So I'll sing the whole two parts and you can see if you can recognize the second song. These are two different songs, but they sound like they should be part of the same song. It goes like this. If you want to be high, be high. And if you want to be low, be low. 'Cause there's a million ways to go. You know that there are. Watch out, the world's behind you. It's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all. You know that song? So the second part there, watch out, the world's behind you, that's from a Velvet Underground song. Totally different song. But they sound like they go together, you know? If you're going to make a science fiction movie, then have a hovercraft chase, for God's sake. I think the Velvet Underground song that it's from is Sunday Morning, maybe. Naive optimism. That's magical, so listen to my magic. I don't think there's any such law that to qualify as science fiction, you must have defensible, scientifically defensible fiction. I mean, most science fiction at least has light speed. That's not scientifically defensible. Except for my cock. That's how fast I hump. Light speed. I'm here sitting in the living room again before Rachel even realizes it's over. It actually takes a long time, but it's so fast that it travels backwards in time slightly. So it's almost like the sex never even happened. That's how fast it is. Science fiction just has to, I would say, JB, I'm gonna modify. I'm gonna edit your sentence a little bit, okay? Science fiction just has to be fiction and have sciencey stuff in it. Good point, JB. Good point. Yeah, elements like the Force are fantasy elements, for sure. Um, but at the same time, they even though that even though it has the core of a fantasy element, namely functionally magic, it has none of the form of fantasy magic. There isn't any spell casting. There aren't wizards um, with hats that have stars on them. There aren't different kinds of magic. You know, it's like it's all using the Force. Calling it a force itself is kind of a science term. Sure, sure, sure. You could critique the scienciness of the Jedi's or whatever, but the point is, it's not uncommon to have something impossible in science fiction and be slapdashedly attributed to some kind of scientific phenomenon that's not explained and simply has words like force vector, you know. Well, force is in Star Wars. So understand that all science fiction, to titillate that desire to have access to the unknown that people have, it has to have stuff that can't be explained in today's science. For example, in today's science, there's no time travel. There's a lot of science fiction that involves time travel, even though it's impossible, and a bad idea anyway. Okay, well, but let's be honest about the ratio of war by weapon. Most of the war, most of the deaths in Star Wars are caused by something other than a lightsaber. They're caused in spaceships fighting each other, or they're caused when the Death Star blows up a planet, or they're caused when people shoot phasers at each other. A stark minority of the deaths can be attributed to lightsaber fighting, although obviously those are the flashiest uh, actors on the stage of the fight. It nevertheless is the case that they are not the most effective actors on the stage of the fight. And almost none of the characters use that weapon. Almost all the characters use laser guns. Well, I mean, Mr. Bobby, though, let's be fair. In a galaxy far, far away sounds like science fiction. A long time ago, maybe leans more towards fantasy, but, you know, I view fantasy as often occurring in um, in the tender folds of scrotum down between my legs. That's where you'll find some little frogs who's laying eggs. Now tadpoles swim my wrinkled canals. I've got to sweat enough for them, and how do I do that? I apply heat to my scrotum. Mr. Bobby, the best conclusion to draw about it is it's a science fiction fantasy that takes advantage of certain fantasy tropes. a science fiction film that takes advantage of certain fantasy tropes. It is ridiculous to try to claim that it's entirely a fantasy film with no claim to being science fiction. You're trying to use some kind of Jedi mind trick on me. But I'm like Jabba the Hutt. Your Jedi mind tricks won't work on me. I'm a huge fat worm. I've got a slave girl on a leash. You can't fool me into believing your unsubstantiated absolutist claim about the proper genre for Star Wars. I will throw you off of my pleasure barge into that giant mouth in the desert. Star Trek's not fantasy either. You guys don't know your penis from your fantasy. You guys don't know the back of your head from a science fiction book. Space fantasy can be a genre, sure, but it would be incorrect to call Star Wars primarily a space fantasy. It's primarily, I even say Star Trek. Oh, well, I've been arguing against the wrong thing. I didn't read very carefully, and now I'm paying the price. My humiliation is complete. I am a deeply shamed and broken man because I should have listened to you better. Well, now you're saying this, what I say. Look, everybody, stop trying to just remove science fiction from something because you think it's got too much magic and whatever. Okay? There are gods in outer space, and there are ray guns. It's science fiction. How many ray guns do you have? None. Why? Because you're not the future. That's why. Some people call it science fiction. I consider it a fairy tale. Well, I mean, what I think's weird is there's a clear lack of understanding of science fiction. I read so much science fiction. I can't even tell you how many different science fiction books I've read. So I have a good baseline of what qualifies as science fiction. And what's happened there, when the director says that, is he's mistaken good storytelling for a sufficient condition to disqualify something from being science fiction. Yet, it's got good storytelling and one notable fairy tale element. It's got a princess in it, you know. But she doesn't take on the normal role of a fairy tale princess. And, you know, some people call it feature film's first openly lesbian princess lead female character. Well, I mean, if Star Wars isn't strictly sci-fi, then nothing is strictly sci-fi. Because that whole hero's journey thing is kind of implicit to most good stories. It doesn't have to be quite as global with its tropes, you might say, but ultimately, what makes a good story is, to some extent, it's a conveyance of a hero's journey. The point is, so like, what's more sci-fi than that? Would it be Starship Troopers? Would it be Alien with Sigourney Weaver? Or you say, no, no, no. That's half science fiction and half horror. What about Your Mom in Outer Space? Is that a sci-fi or is that fantasy? Well, I know it's pornography, but does that qualify as fantasy? Explosions in space, though, while not very sciencey, are very exciting. That's how you know when you shot the bad guy or when something important happens. Well, yeah, I know it's a satire, or it's a but it's also a science fiction movie, right? You guys need to stop creating all these hybrid genres. Next, you're going to tell me Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is a hybrid science fiction children's movie. Spaceballs is just something that needed to have been thrown directly into the trash can. Okay, well, if you go a long, long time ago, back far enough, Mr. Bobby, you get past the beginning, you end up back here in the future. So probably that's what it means. Or you could argue instead, if you wanted to take a more traditional argumentational approach to the question, that because of the longevity, durability, and existential limits on a species or civilization sustaining itself, that in conjunction with the fact that galaxies and suns and stuff, black holes or whatnot, they operate on such a exponentially huger time frame that the universe could have already hosted multiple fully spacefaring civilizations that began, bloomed, thrived, petered out, and finally died in the history of the trillions of years or whatever of the universe. It doesn't feel responsible. What, riding your motorcycle without a helmet? It's not responsible. You should always wear a helmet when you're on a motorcycle. Right. They don't necessarily tell you even what genre it is on Netflix, or you look at a show, they'll have these adjectives like offbeat, uh, uh, heist, you know, and um, suspenseful. I don't know, something like that. which really is a better way to do it than saying what genre it is. It at least gives you the adjectives that they want, that they think best represent it if you're trying to sell it. Like, okay, I have to pick only 3 adjectives. Which 3 adjectives are we going to try to sell this thing with? That'll tell you a lot. Like, if it says heartfelt, probably no. Probably you don't want to watch that. Heartfelt's an adjective to avoid. Dark, avoid that one. Avoid gritty. Those ones aren't good. You don't want to watch anything gritty because, as we like to say in the city, that which is gritty is way too shitty. So, yeah, this show is really great. It has incredibly realistic domestic violence scenes. No. That's why people watch those things, I do not know. How can seeing humanity at its ugliest, dramatically portrayed by excellent actors, have a positive impact on your life? Big sneezes for little Eric. And as you can see there, I was this close to falling over. I would really like to make Host Eric bingo cards. You know, and disseminate them somehow to people, or have random things on, like, discusses Ukraine, or, of course, people will try to prompt you to talk about it, but you'd have to have a rule, that a gentleman's agreement that you shouldn't do that. You have to let the thing come up naturally. If it's prompted by somebody, it doesn't count, you know, something like that. Because you don't want any prompted discussion of Ukraine. You only want unprompted Eric pontification on the subject. Another thing would be like, gets a 16-ounce half and half from the fridge. Has to pull up his pants because he forgot to wear a belt. This time I have a belt on, so even though I had to pull up my pants, you wouldn't get to mark that one off. That wouldn't qualify as a hit on your bingo card. Eric talks about his scrotum. Like that, if you got a bingo card with that one on it, you'd be like, yes, that's like every single stream. I guess you could just say mentions, or because talks about is kind of vague. If I just say the words my scrotum, is that sufficient to qualify as a hit on your bingo card? Or do I need to have something to say about it? Like, My scrotum's feeling especially fresh today. My scrotum. Oh my God, do you see that? I think back there's a one-eyed Sasquatch whose eye is glowing in the night. He just ran off. But wait a second. He's peeking around the corner. Oh, I must have startled him. It's okay, Mr. Sasquatch. Come here. Come here. Yeah, you're a good Sasquatch. Are you scared? A little timid? Oh, he ran off again. Hopefully he'll come back. I call him Rudolph because he's the red-eyed Sasquatch, you know. But he only has one eye, just like Rudolph only has one nose. A lot of things might have two red eyes. That wouldn't really draw a good linkage to Rudolph. It's the one red eye, which, if you can only see that, stands out like Rudolph's nose. Oh, there he is again. Here he's coming back. He's looking over the wall. He's peeking over the wall and then hiding down behind it again. It's cold out here. I have to go back inside. Pronto. I'm going to go back inside pronto. I'm going to quickly whip up a batch of pinto beans from scratch. Refry said pinto beans in lard and make bean and cheese burritos. No, I'm not going to do that. Pinto beans take a long time to cook. Super long time. You don't want your beans toothy. You can maybe have your pasta toothy. Maybe you can have your rice toothy even a little bit, but you don't want your beans toothy. You want your beans to have even less teeth than me. But I, who know better, want beans to have fewer teeth than me. So I hope we learned a lot out here in the dark tonight. Sometimes the dark is where we learn the most. Like this one time, I was in the dark, and I ran into a table, and I learned, oh, that's where the table is. I used those googly eyes a couple of times. I don't remember on what exactly. I'm not sure if they made it here or not. It's true of a number of things. I would put those googly eyes on a long list of things that I still am not really sure if they made it to this house or not, or what, you know. JB, I'm really glad to hear about your scrotum, because one of the biggest problems plaguing society today is men don't take good enough care of their scrotums. All across the country, there are men who are suffering from itchy scrotum, unwashed scrotum, sweaty scrotum. All of these disorders can be prevented with regular scrotum maintenance. All it requires is a 32 volt buffer with the softest of sheepskin. 2 jars of scrotum polish, and obviously a bottle of scrotum moistener for after the polish. You should have no fewer than 4 or 5 scrotum maintenance products. I actually have a little sauna. It's just for my scrotum. My balls aren't allowed in there. I just have to get just a scrotum flap and put it in there. And there's a tiny Swedish woman in there who pours water on the hot rocks. And that's really one of the best ways. You know, you can't really ever get the wrinkles all out of your scrotum, but steaming it in the sauna is a good way to try. You might also try hair straightener, but make sure, check the box, make sure it says safe for scrotums. Worst case scenario, if you can't fix the wrinkle problem, you could always get Botox injected into your scrotum. And, you know, obviously, most people agree, the more pouty a scrotum looks, the more attractive it is. Tar and feathers. You probably don't want to tar and feather your scrotum. Even if you're reenacting being chased out of town in an old-fashioned way. You might tar and feather your torso, maybe even go as far as to get your buttocks, but I'd keep that tar as far away from your scrotum as possible. That's why I only let my scrotum smoke light cigarettes. They have less tar in them. Tomatoes are good. You could put a tomato mask on your scrotum. In the same way that you put cucumber slices over your eyes, you scoop out a tomato, kind of a longish tomato, and you just tuck your bottom boys down into there, and it'll moisturize, revigin, and rejuvenate all day long. It'll also add body and sheen to your scrotum hairs. So now that we've discussed that plenty, I'm going to have to go to sleep now. I have to bid you good night because I took the larger half of a Klonopin. This cutter didn't cut it evenly in the middle. Rachel's other cutter is better, and we had a discussion earlier about how she should make that one the default one. Because I lined it up as perfectly as I could. Sack, Wizzick, Nugget pouch, Nutsack, Man pouch. All those are fine. Testicular knapsack is also commonly used. Retractable sperm factory structure, building. A retractable sperm factory building. You could also call it my man purse. Like that. Call my man purse. I could call it Wrinkle Town? I could refer to it as the canister. People just know what I'm talking about. I could refer to it as my sperm thermostat, because that's really what it's doing. It's like it's trying to get your sperms a little further away if they're getting too hot, a little closer if they're getting too cold. That's why when you wake up on cold mornings, your balls are all like pulled up, almost all into your body, and your scrotum's all as tight as a scrunchie on the first day at the factory floor. And you go, wow, you guys are really making a break for it. I was under the covers even. Well, we should all keep a log of the time we spend with our scrotums. By directing a little bit of attention to what it is you're doing, you're going to improve the relationship with your scrotum substantially. Maybe you could call it placebo effect, but really, it's just that when other people, like your scrotum, get your full, undivided, honest attention, good things happen. So, anyway, keep that in mind for Mother's Day is coming up. Keep that in mind for Mother's Day. Maybe give her a bag of scrotum polish. Then she can re-gift it to your dad and you won't have to buy a Father's Day present. Anyway, enough about all these great ideas. They're all great, blue ribbon, first-rate dynamite ideas, but I am about to fall asleep where I'm sitting. That is how heavy these eyelids are. The addition of benzo into my system at the end of a long day with lots of labor has created a perfect storm of tiredness. I'm physically tired because I did a lot of physical things. I'm mentally tired because this is my second stream of the day. And I had to deal with that salesman guy. And I might even be emotionally tired. Because Adderall, you make sacrifices in your subjective epistemologies with Adderall, your SI and your FI. You don't really feel FI much, and except for some certain points like irritable / fine, but I should probably do more stuff of some kind of productive stuff or whatever. Like I went into the attic earlier to get Rachel a container for her clothes, to put her clothes in. But while I was there, I found, because I keep looking through stuff in the attic and periodically coming across other cool things. I found this in the attic. It is a big Swiss Army knife. Yes, it's got a corkscrew. But like Like that's a nice knife there. I guess it's got, yeah, it's locked, so you gotta pull this down to close it, I guess. Well, now it's got to be stuck open forever because I can't figure out how to close it. Let me get my glasses on. That sometimes helps. How do I, yeah, this. How do I close it? I don't know how to close it. He's got this red thing. You think you'd pull this down to close it, but no. It won't close. No, there it goes. Okay, yes it will. Then it's also got, of course, your bottle opener. And your can opener. It's also got, lastly, your fish scaler. Well, lastly, your corkscrew. And your leather punch. This is a great Swiss Army knife. I don't normally love Swiss Army knives, but this has all the things you want / need and nothing you don't, and everything's bigger and more sturdier than on a normal Swiss Army knife. Corkscrew, it sometimes comes in handy. You never know when someone's going to want to open a bottle of wine and there's not a corkscrew there. This is a fishing Swiss Army knife, so it's got that big ass fish scaler on it. But the main knife is also a great fishing knife. It's like for gutting fish and cleaning and stuff. Anyway, me likey a whole bunch. This is like my new favorite knife. It comes in this convenient carrying case too. You could, if you didn't want to forego the carrying case, you could put it on your keys, but it's too heavy for your keys. You zip it up. Now you could just put it in your pocket, or you could put this in your belt through it, or wear it like a wrist thing, or you could just tie this somewhere, like just go like that. But yeah, I don't really like the idea of having a carrying case for a knife. I'd rather just put it in my pocket. But I'm very fond of that knife. That's a great knife. So, it was in a backpack in the garage that had other fishing stuff in it too. That was the gem of it. But it had some bait. It had a stringer, a metal stringer. It had a scooping net with a scooping green net to scoop them out of the water with, And the backpack itself was quite cool. Then it had a bunch of old fishing licenses and stuff from the previous owner, which I just threw away. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Okay, good night, everybody. I love you with my heart, which is where all good emotions come from. Take that to bed. Think a bit. Suck on it for a little while you're in bed. Suckle on it for a while. I think you're going to fall right asleep. Because what could be more reassuring than knowing that I love you with emotions from my heart? Good night, everybody.